Thank you so much to all of you for coming out this evening. Thank you so much to my gracious hosts who have set up this trip, provided tours for me, are picking me up and taking me to the airport, all kinds of personal services that have just made my trip so very special. Thank you to all the funders that made this trip and this talk possible. Thank you to Paul for recommending this experience to me and recommending me to all of you. And thank you to all of the people who are behind the work and the ideas that I'll be sharing tonight. I make no claim to be the expert in urban forestry, in urban ecology, or really in anything other than being me. My work rests on the shoulders of so many people, and I'm so grateful to be a part of such a big network. So, the title of my talk this evening is a little long, right? I think the one the other day was better, but I decided to keep this one. Urban forests as a means of building ecological and social resilience. I will be exploring, hopefully in an interactive way, at least a bit with you, why, how, and to what ends we plant and manage trees in cities and towns. In particular, why we plant and manage trees in dry cities and towns, like Denver, where I call home, and here in Astana. Although there are many differences between our two cities, I think there are also some important ecological and social similarities. I hope the ideas, challenges, and opportunities that we discuss tonight will help you all consider whether and how to continue including trees and other native and environmentally adapted plants in your vibrant urban ecosystem. All right. So on Saturday, I was able to have a discussion with the Urbanitarium students about building connections between people and nature. It's good to see some of you back in the audience again. These students made a lot of really excellent observations and asked deep, good questions. One of those questions is really exactly what I want to talk about tonight. Is it sustainable to grow an urban forest here in Astana when our native ecosystem is a steppe? This is a perfect question because it is the same question we continue to ask ourselves in Denver, in the state of Colorado, and in much of the Western United States. In these places, urban forestry, trees in cities and towns, is an act of afforestation rather than reforestation or restoration. We are most often creating new forests in cities like Denver and here in Astana, where they did not previously exist. What else didn't exist in Astana, say, 50 years ago? What's really different here than the original ecosystem? Skyscrapers, exactly, lots of people. So I'm gonna try to make an argument that because we have a city here, because we have a community, that trees do belong. So Denver, where I'm from, way on the other side of the world. This city is located in the High Plains region of the United States of America. Unlike the temperate forests on the East Coast and the West Coast of the country, where American cities have been carved out of native forests for more than 400 years. This region in the middle of the country is characterized by sprawling grasslands and shrublands. Our relatively sparse natural forests follow rivers and streams, like the South Platte River, depicted in this image, and runs through the heart of Denver. Native American cultures often lived in or near these forested areas and used the trees and the rivers for transport, for communication, for medicine, textiles, trade, and other cultural and functional purposes. They lived with, modified, and continue to interact with the environment in ways that enable both their culture and its surroundings to thrive and reflect a deeper understanding of ecology than most people who identify as American today hold. But that's really a whole nother talk. As Europeans settled this landscape and built cities beginning in the 19th century, they planted trees for a number of reasons, namely to moderate intense heat and wind and to beautify new neighborhoods. In fact, the Arbor Day Foundation, now an international tree planting organization, was founded in Colorado's neighbor state to the east of Nebraska. Organized by newspaper editor, businessman, and then secretary of the Nebraska Territory, J. Sterling Morton organized the first Arbor Day in April of 1872. An estimated 1 million trees were planted in Nebraska on that first Arbor Day. Since then, this holiday has grown into a celebration of tree planting that is observed in all 50 states and many places around the world. Taking a look again at Colorado's ecosystems, zooming in a little bit from that continental scale, our ecosystems are defined by interacting climate, soil, elevation, water availability, and other factors. Within our state, we see tremendous ecological diversity. But to simplify things, ecosystems are mostly grasslands and shrublands, the kind of brown and yellow and orange on the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains, and a number of different forest types at higher elevations in the mountains and west onto the Colorado Plateau. That red rectangle there is where we will zoom into next and where Denver is located. In this image, we see an even finer grained picture of forest, shrub, grassland, agricultural, and urban lands, including what is now a robust urban forest. This recent regional habitat assessment was conducted by the nonprofit organization's Metro Denver Nature Alliance, where I used to work before coming to the State Forest Service, and the Nature Conservancy, which is a global conservation nonprofit. The circled area here is where the city of Denver is. Within Denver's urban forest, you will find both native and introduced species of trees. When I say native, this is a somewhat problematic but common term used in the United States for plants and animals occurring within a particular area prior to European settlement. Native plant communities contribute to a region's unique visual characteristics, provide wildlife habitat, and contribute to overall biodiversity. Colorado's native trees that are suited to Denver's climate and our elevation at about 5,000 feet above sea level. These trees include mostly maple, poplar, juniper, spruce, and pine species. Walking around here, I've noticed that you have a lot of the same trees. I've also seen a lot of elms, which we have, as well as apple trees, which we have. So my hunch that our ecosystems were at least a bit similar were confirmed. I have done science. All right. Native trees, however, are not the only species that can be considered suitable, environmentally adapted, or climate adapted for planting in cities and towns. In fact, some native species are not at all recommended in urban settings. For example, quaking aspen, Populus tremuloides in the Latin, if we have any ecologists in the room, is not recommended in residential settings because of its clonal growth habit and its susceptibility to pests and disease. It just doesn't hold up well. Lots of people find it weedy, and it is a pain in the butt to manage. Fortunately, more than 30 years of research and observation, experimentation in Colorado and elsewhere has yielded dozens of other recommended types of trees. This is a good thing, to have lots of options for planting, because when it comes to climate change and urban forests, when it comes to ecology, diversity means resilience. The more different types of trees that we have in our urban forests, the more resilient these systems will be, especially to insects and diseases that often target particular tree species or genera. By planting and observing the performance of different trees over time, we can also learn which ones do well, which management techniques work best, which management techniques don't work so well, and adapt our decision-making over time. In Colorado and across the US, we continually seek to find new climate-adapted trees and remove those which we find to be problematic from recommended planting lists used in many communities. These lists and the research behind them is openly shared among institutions. The partners listed here are just a few of the many involved. A couple that I'll bring attention to, because I know that there is an old arboretum, a dendro park in the city here, and a new botanic gardens. These institutions in the US are incredibly important partners in doing this research on environmentally adapted trees. But what does that mean? Climate adapted or environmentally adapted? And back to our original question, should we be planting trees where they don't naturally occur? For example, another excellent question brought up on Monday, doesn't it take a lot of water to grow trees in dry environments? Very simply, the answer is yes to both questions. Building on fundamental concepts such as biophilia, or humankind's innate love of, connection to, and need for nature, and decades of research on the health and economic benefits of nature in cities, I say yes. Trees and other green infrastructure elements are essential components of thriving and resilient cities. And yes, it does take energy. It does take water to grow trees in dry environments, but not nearly as much as is wasted in the maintenance of monoculture turf grass lawns or the overuse of artificial cooling in too many American cities. This term green infrastructure, I really love it because it encourages us to consider nature as an essential city system and to invest in nature as thoughtfully and as thoroughly as we would in our water, sewer, power, communication, or transportation systems. Doing so, considering trees and nature as infrastructure, allows us to find more cost-efficient, low-impact, and effective solutions to water management, food production, air quality improvement, and some public health concerns. Nature in cities, like in the image on that previous slide, can take many forms, serve many functions, and provide many benefits. Resource libraries, like those shown here, the Vibrant Cities Lab, the Healthy Trees, Healthy Lives Project, and the University of Washington's Green Cities, Good Health collection, house a wealth of resources, case studies, policy templates, and other tools that can be used to justify and guide the planning, planting, and long-term maintenance of a city's green infrastructure, including its urban forest. Oversimplifying things again in the interest of time, I will address just a few of the most important benefits of urban trees and nature growing in cities like Denver and here in Astana. Let's talk about human health. We are the things in cities that weren't there before. We are the new and the novel part of these social ecological systems. So I think that human health benefits of nature are some of the most important benefits to consider when creating new forests in places where they did not exist before. Urban forests can be used to improve a variety of issues, such as respiratory diseases, asthma, skin cancer, and reducing the number of heat-related deaths. Urban forests can also promote active lifestyles and active transportation, which can reduce obesity and improve mental health. For example, taking a 20-minute walk or sitting in a forested city park can reduce mental stress, improve concentration, and improve creativity. Acting on this information, the University of Texas in El Paso, another arid or very dry U.S. city, increased green space on their campus by 60%. They did so using native and climate-adapted trees. They strategically planted these trees alongside other native shrubs and cactus to maximize mental relaxation according to, designs that are in research. And they created new shady areas for rest. This design, implemented in 2016, earned a silver Sustainable Sites rating from the Green Business Certification Incorporated, the organization primarily responsible for organizing and recognizing excellence in green business, performance, and practice globally. I think that's a pretty nice looking campus. I would go there. The second set of benefits that I think are really important to discuss are economic development and business impact, so the financial benefits of nature in cities. According to multiple research studies, trees increase retail sales, attract shoppers to business districts from farther away and keep them there longer, and can improve employee performance. Additionally, urban forestry jobs require a variety of skills that support a resilient local economy and stable employment for laborers, managers, and educators. Other benefits of urban forests can be quantified and communicated in terms of dollars and economics. This is often the only metric that makes sense to some policymakers. So we have spent a lot of time and effort and money developing tools that can translate these more intangible and more health-related benefits into dollars. Just one example, city of Boise, Idaho, another neighbor to Colorado and dry, middle of the country place. This city's forestry management plan estimates that their urban forest contributes stormwater runoff reduction benefits worth almost $500,000 each year, reduces energy costs by almost $400,000 per year, and avoids over $3 million in healthcare expenses each year. Now that we know we can get this work done and some of the reasons why we might want to engage in work on our urban forest, what are the steps, the methods, the tools, and the expertise needed to make lasting investments that are resilient in the face of continued climate change, development, political changes, and other changes? I think there are three essential phases to this work: assessment, planning, and management. So, step one, in order to manage anything, trees, your budget, how many shoes you have, anything, you need to know what you have. You need to understand where you're starting from. You need to have a baseline. Two essential tools at this assessment phase are tree inventories and canopy assessments. With these data, you can estimate ecosystem services or benefits provided by existing trees, as well as where these benefits are reaching residents or not. This is called tree equity. You can also learn a lot about the extent of the urban forest. How big is it? What species comprise it? And what condition are those trees in? In its most basic form, an urban tree inventory documents the location, species, and size of trees within a defined area at a point in time. We recently conducted this kind of simple inventory to understand the extent of ash trees, trees in the genus Fraxinus, in communities along Colorado's Front Range, where we are managing our urban forests for the invasive insect, the emerald ash borer. Having and sharing this baseline information with smaller communities that did not have their own resources to do this assessment will help them and all of us at a regional level respond to EAB in an efficient and economical manner. At the end of the project, which for those who get English puns, we called "Your Ash is on the Line." Anyway, we think it's funny. At the end of the project, we had documented almost 9,000 trees that collectively produce over $1.5 million per year in ecosystem services. If not properly managed, these are economic, social, and environmental benefits that we will lose as these trees become unhealthy and die. We used a globally available tool called Tree Keeper by the private company Davy Resource Group to complete and share these community inventories. As I've been walking around here in Astana with my hosts, I can see evidence here of at least a desire to begin documenting and tracking trees that are planted, as well as those that are historically significant to the community. I think this is a really, really great start. Within the broader urban tree population of the state of Colorado, building off of those ash tree inventories I was just talking about, we also know that trees within this genus comprise about 12 to 15% of all urban trees within Colorado's Front Range communities. While we do not have a complete count, a census of every single urban tree, and especially not those on private property, we do have enough data to make educated estimates and to develop informed management practices. We collect and can view tree inventories from multiple communities in this tool, developed using the Tree Plotter software by Planet Geo, another private company. This tool that the Colorado State Forest Service has developed is called Co-Tree View. Tree inventories can also be much more detailed than the ones that we've produced as a service to small communities. And many cities use their inventory to actively manage their urban forest. They're built using commercially available software like Tree Keeper and Tree Plotter that I just showed you, or from scratch using ArcGIS and other geographic information systems if a municipality has the internal resources to do so. This is an example from a Western Colorado community. The city of Grand Junction tracks all of their publicly managed trees, so trees in parks, trees along streets, trees that they are directly responsible for, using this custom platform. They have created this dashboard or this summary to share the extent, diversity, and condition of the urban forest with residents, with students, with other city departments that might care about their urban forest. The second planning tool I want to talk about a bit looks at trees a little bit differently. While tree inventories count and document tree stems, points on a map that represent individuals, a tree canopy assessment looks at the extent of these trees' leaves and how much of a defined area is covered by that tree canopy. Davy Resource Group, Planet Geo, and other companies also produce the software for these assessments and can be contracted to complete them, as well as the management plans that accompany them. Other communities build their own. This is what a tree canopy assessment looks like. This particular study was completed in 2015 in the city of Colorado Springs, which is just south of Denver. This study documented a 17% overall tree canopy. So if this table were the city of Colorado Springs, less than a quarter of that table is covered with tree leaves. This is a pretty good representation of what Denver and other Front Range urban ecosystems look like. That 17 to 20% canopy coverage is pretty normal within our ecosystems. In other parts of the country, other parts of the world, that number can be much higher because they were naturally more forested ecosystems. Their climates are less extreme. They get more water. They can have tree canopy coverages more like 40%, but that would be an unrealistic tool or an unrealistic goal for somewhere like Denver. It wouldn't be sustainable. These assessments also look at and quantify other land uses and land covers, including other vegetation, such as grasses and shrubs, impervious surfaces like buildings, roads, and parking lots, and dry land and water. So if this table or a pie, we like to talk about pies a lot and make pie charts, 17% of the table is trees, 30% more of the table is other vegetation, another 30% is buildings and roads, and so on. This assessment also documented significant disparities in tree cover when the data were summarized across city council districts. So instead of looking at the city as a whole, what if you look at smaller units? Neighborhoods, census blocks, city council districts are the areas from which our local government representatives are elected by the people. What you can see when you look at tree canopy data at this level is that it's not the same everywhere. The highest tree canopy cover, closer to 30%, occurs in the western parts of the city, while the easternmost neighborhoods only had 4 to 11% canopy cover. The citywide average, again, was 17%, but those communities on the west had much greater access to trees and the benefits of trees than those on the east side. So the experience of the urban forest is different across the city. We have been looking at these differences a lot lately and thinking about how to make some of them go away, create more equitable access to nature, to tree canopy, and to the benefits of nature. This newer tool called Tree Equity Score was developed recently by the US nonprofit American Forests. It compares tree canopy, basic tree canopy assessments to other social and economic data within a community to assess how equitable or not the distribution of tree canopy is. Very often, neighborhoods with lower incomes, lower health outcomes, less access to education, and higher populations of minority groups have lower tree canopy and therefore less access to the benefits of nature. These data and assessments are available in all major urban areas across the United States, including, of course, Denver. In Denver and along the Front Range, that's kind of the north-south slice of communities just east of the Rocky Mountains, we see relatively high equity scores overall, lots of green, less orange in the map on the left, but a closer look reveals neighborhood level inequity. Again, this means that not all people within a city have the same level of access to tree canopy, to nature, and to the benefits these natural resources provide. For example, this northeastern neighborhood in Denver has a tree equity score of 51, an average canopy cover of only 3%, which is well below average and below a suggested neighborhood goal, an ecologically feasible goal of 24%. And this neighborhood experiences summer temperatures around 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees Celsius. Its population is 60% people of color, and 60% of its residents live in poverty. In contrast, this community has a tree equity score of 96, an average tree canopy of 17%, which is much closer to the average and much closer to a suggested goal, and experiences somewhat cooler peak summer temperatures. There are far fewer people of color in this neighborhood, and there are far fewer people living within poverty within this neighborhood. It would again be a whole nother lecture to go into why some of these disparities exist and persist, but suffice it to say it's a problem. Using aerial photography, this is what the difference looks like between high tree canopy cover in more wealthy neighborhoods, the image on the right, and low tree canopy cover in lower income and more industrial parts of the city, the image on the left. Where might you prefer to live, work, and learn? So again, lots of information. There's so much information, so much data that we have access to now when it comes to ecology, economics, planning. What on earth do we do with all of it? We bring it together, we try to make sense of it, and we make a plan of action. Because what good are data if we don't do anything with them? In making this plan of action, we think strategically and long-term about how to get from where we are today to where we want to be years in the future. The time frame of our plans matters. Short-range plans, a few months, a year, a couple of years, they simply don't cut it in urban forestry or ecology. Trees, like humans, are long-lived beings, at least if they're properly tended to. Rushing ahead with tree planting without adequate knowledge of and standards guiding proper planting, establishment, and care can lead to a lot of wasted time and resources. This is true for the people doing the planning, the planting, and the growing of the trees to be planted. Another thing I have observed during my visit to Astana, and I could show similar pictures from plenty of US communities, but I have seen some well-intentioned but poorly executed tree planting. In projects like this, I would encourage additional thought be given to when and where trees are planted, especially during construction. Attention to how deeply these trees are planted, to what protection, nutrients, and water they are provided during establishment, and how long any items around the trunk are left on that could restrict growth and damage or kill the tree. If I come back next year, I don't expect to see these same trees, just being honest. Okay, planning. There are a lot of different names we give to urban forestry plans in the United States. Master plans, strategic plans, action plans, management plans, Dana's super awesome plan to take over the urban forests of the world. They're all basically the same. Whatever a plan is called, it's most effective when it's embedded within a city's larger planning and regulatory framework. This includes comprehensive plans that guide development, land use, and zoning, as well as a city's collection of rules and regulations guiding the management of its infrastructure systems, including green infrastructure. We usually call these rules at the city level in the US ordinances. And one of the requirements for a recognition program that I'll talk a little more about in a moment is called a tree protection ordinance. This is a legal document that defines, at a minimum, whose responsibility it is to care for trees on public property, such as along roads and in city parks. Tree ordinances also frequently include recommended tree lists or don't plant these prohibited tree lists, specific species, specific types of trees that we don't want in our communities because they're susceptible to a pest, they're very weedy, or for other reasons. And now the fun stuff, the work of urban forestry. While well thought out assessments and plans can justify urban forestry projects, can attract funding and support and set us up for success, if we don't have the people and organizations committed to planting, establishing, and maintaining the urban forest, then all that work in the first phases was unnecessary. You may as well print that plan and recycle it. It was just on paper. In addition to thinking about stewarding urban trees, taking care of them while they are living and growing, it is critically important to think ahead about each tree's full life cycle, about its eventual decline, death, and removal. Planning ahead for removals can reduce risk, reduce cost, and open up opportunities for wood utilization that can offset the costs of management and removal. So who are the folks that do this work? There are many different professionals and volunteers involved with tree planting and management in cities. Government employees include people working at the local level, in cities and in counties, people in state government like myself, and for federal agencies like the US Forest Service. These organizations are most often the ones responsible for planning and funding and for the overall management of urban forests. Some cities have staff to do their own tree work, like some cities have GIS staff to do their assessments and plans, while many others contract the work to private companies or nonprofits and may engage volunteers in less technical work like planting, mulching, watering, pulling weeds, and young tree pruning. Engaging students and volunteers and residents in the management of urban forests builds community, advances environmental literacy, and creates a sense of ownership and care for the natural environment among the people in that city, in that ecosystem. Nonprofit and education partners are essential in this community engagement. Other jobs, however, like large tree pruning and tree removal, are highly technical, expensive, equipment-intensive, dangerous, and best left to highly skilled, certified, trusted, licensed, and insured professionals. And behind all these people doing the work with and in the trees is a whole nother network, a whole nother ecosystem of people supporting that work. This support network includes academic and professional educators, funders in both the public and private sectors, and policymakers. These people and organizations help make sure that the tree work gets done well, safely, and that those doing it to make a living can make a living. If there is one thing that I have noticed, loved, and done my best to contribute to working in urban forestry, it is the large, tightly knit, and always open network of lifelong learners that are in this industry. Tree people, that's what we call ourselves. Tree people love trees. We love talking about trees. We love being in trees. We love learning about trees and teaching others about trees. We love celebrating our role models who have been in the industry for a long time, and we love supporting those who are just getting started on their journey. One of the most valuable networks supporting urban foresters and tree care workers is the International Society of Arboriculture, also called ISA. This is the global training and certification organization for our profession. ISA publishes industry standards and best management practices, as well as educational materials designed to prepare professionals for credentialing as an arborist, tree care worker, tree risk assessor, or related professional. There are dozens of ISA chapters, including in Asia and Eastern Europe. These chapters organize continuing education events for their members, encourage new people to join the industry, administer courses and exams for ISA credentials and qualifications, and host tree climbing competitions. Now, these are really fun. These competitions provide an opportunity each year for our best industrial athletes in the field, tree climbers, to show off and build their skills for a chance to compete internationally. My home chapter, the Rocky Mountain chapter, which spans the states of Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico in the US, will be hosting the ISA Annual Conference and International Tree Climbing Championship this August in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We are so excited to welcome well over 1,000 professionals from all over the world to work and learn in our unique environment. The Society for Municipal Arborists is another US-based professional association of urban foresters and tree care professionals working specifically in cities and towns. It is a place for them to develop their skills and professional networks, to pursue training and mentorship, and influence policies that affect their work at a national level. One of this association's most well-known and valuable training opportunities is the Municipal Forestry Institute. This is a week-long program for early and mid-career urban forestry professionals. Another set of programs and networks that has been a part of urban forestry in the US since the very beginning are the Arbor Day Foundation's Tree City, Tree Line, and Tree Campus programs. Now global in scope with the launch of the Tree Cities of the World program in 2018, these programs support communities, including cities, towns, schools, hospital campuses, and utility companies celebrating Arbor Day, investing in their trees and forests, and supporting the policies, professional capacity, and volunteer networks needed to maintain these valuable resources. So welcome to the Urban Forestry Party, and thank you. I sincerely invite all of you to consider and explore in greater depth all of these ideas, tools, and networks as you continue to develop your beautiful city into a thriving place for people and nature, for commerce and ecology, for education and new experiences. Thank you again for the invitation, and I would love to welcome whatever time we have for discussion now.
Thank you, Dana. Давайте тогда мы начнем сессию небольшую отзывов, вопросов к Дэне. Воспользуемся тем, что она еще здесь. Я предлагаю нам поднимать руку, у кого есть какой-то вопрос или комментарий. И у нас есть второй микрофон. Сейчас мы его... Вот он у Асель. Да, пожалуйста. Вот только помните, что нужно поближе держать, чтобы Влад все слышал и переводил вам. Вы можете задавать вопросы на русском. Вообще не проблема.
Дана, спасибо большое за информативную такую содержательную лекцию. И у меня такой вопрос. Я поняла, что вы уже ходили по городу, видели наши существующие деревья, наши посадки. И вот хотелось бы ваш взгляд незамыленный, видеть, какие ошибки в обрезке, в посадке. Ну, то, что я вижу, например, часто, что деревья сажаются очень близко, мне кажется, не учитывается взрослые уже габариты растения. Закопаны корневые шейки, обрезка структуры. Ну, как бы я вижу такой способ посадки с детства, и, может быть, что-то кажется уже нормальным. Хотелось бы услышать ваш взгляд со стороны, как вы это видите, и что можно было бы исправить. Спасибо.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And like I said, with a couple of the photographs that I shared from here, we still make a lot of the same mistakes and commit the same crimes against trees. And that's why there's such a focus on professional education, on standards, and on training people about how to plant and care for trees in the best way that will keep them living and providing all of these benefits that we promise. So some of the issues, mistakes that I was seeing were trees planted what looks to me like too deep. If you ever see a tree in the ground and it looks more like a pole and you don't see a taper or an increase in size toward the bottom, chances are it's planted too deep. And the problem that presents is that the majority of a tree's root system that is doing the work of roots, exchanging air and water and nutrients, it's in the first 6 to 12 inches of soil. And if you plant that tree so that those roots are starting too low, it's like putting yourself in a bathtub and you can't breathe. The trees kind of suffocate or drown. They won't die immediately, but they will not live to a big, happy old age if planted too deep. Other things that I saw with newly planted trees, some mechanical damage on the trunk. They had branches broken off, damage to the trunk from some kind of equipment. A lot of trees can seal those injuries and it's okay, but whenever that damage becomes too much, that can kill the tree. One thing that was concerning with the newer trees was those plastic tags on them that looked like the beginnings of an inventory. This has a number on it. Somebody's keeping track of this, but they put a plastic tag around the trunk of the tree that, if not removed pretty quickly, will girdle the tree. All of the living, growing, actively growing tissue of trees is at the outside. And if you restrict that growth, whether with a rope, a tag, a metal grate, or a circling root, it will strangle the tree and eventually kill it. On older trees, I saw a lot of pruning, some of which looked good and would meet standards and best management practices that I'm familiar with. Other cuts that were either too far in to the trunk of the tree or too far out and leaving kind of a long stub or a ragged edge. So these are all very common problems in tree care, and the more we're all willing to talk about them and educate ourselves, educate other professionals, and hold professionals accountable to some kind of standard. So if a contractor is hired to do a tree planting, the specifications that contractor gets should say, you plant the tree this way, you leave it this way, you put the stakes on this way, and if you don't do it, you don't get paid, or you have to come back and fix it. So those are some thoughts on that very good question.
Спасибо большое. Есть ли еще вопросы или предложения? Да. Я попрошу еще, если не сложно, представляться, потому что я знаю, что здесь есть профессионалы, которые тоже занимаются подобными вопросами.
Мне очень приятно, Дана, что вы приехали в наш город. И хотелось бы спросить, вы в ботаническом саду были, в оранжерее в частности? Я там работаю, мне бы хотелось ваше мнение услышать и увидеть вас у нас в гостях в оранжерее ботанического сада города Астаны.
Yeah. I have not been there yet. I would love to go there. I did get to walk through the old dendro park and saw some of the trees that are there in a little more wild kind of format, but I have not visited the botanical garden yet. So
Я думаю, что мы успеем посетить ботанический сад. Спасибо за приглашение, обязательно, я думаю, придем. Есть ли еще вопросы, может быть, у кого-то? Не стесняйтесь, задавайте. Это могут быть самые разные вопросы.
Спасибо за лекцию. Меня зовут Алия, я архитектор-урбанист. И я сейчас изучаю больше город как со стороны женщин и безопасности. И вот хотела спросить по поводу вот наличие количества деревьев на улицах, в общественном пространстве, влияет ли это на безопасность? Например, как освещение, то же самое, как, ну вот если есть количество деревьев какое-то, и влияет ли это на безопасность?
yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question. I didn't address that particular research, but there is a large body of research on the impacts that trees in cities, and particularly well-maintained trees in cities, has on crime. And there is a perception, a myth, that having trees makes places less safe. Oh, a burglar or an attacker can hide behind a tree. The data are actually quite the opposite. That just as in business districts that are more attractive because they have trees that are well maintained, that are providing shade, in communities that have trees, there are fewer crimes and fewer violent crimes. So I think that if you've studied, I don't know what literature people read when they're studying architecture or planning, but when I was an architecture student many years ago, we read Jane Jacobs, and this notion of a more active, a more vibrant urban space is a safer urban space. A greener urban space is also a safer urban space.
So my question is, на русском, да, я лучше задам. Я хотела спросить, когда вы говорите о какой-то выгодности своих проектов, как вы переносите на цифры пользу для здоровья людей? То есть как это в цифрах, как перенести это на цифры, чтобы показать, что это будет полезно в долгосрочной перспективе для здравоохранения?
Yeah, good question. And that could be a whole nother lecture, right? And there have been large research projects looking at actual like biomechanical measurements, like measuring people's pulse and how much they're sweating and their body temperature when they're in a green space, they're in a park with trees, or sometimes even just being able to see a tree from their window. There's a tremendous amount of research out there showing real physical evidence that trees in nature and views of greenery improve health. There's a large study, I'm going to forget exactly where it is. I think it's in Tennessee in the United States, called the Green Heart Project. And that is a research project between tree people and a hospital. And they're doing some of that direct biomechanical research and then surveys with patients about their experiences. So if there's an interest, I could compile some resources to share on that. It's not my direct area of expertise, but compared to 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I started in this industry, the data and the concrete evidence for the health benefits of trees has just grown tremendously. And one of, I'm going to try not to make you dizzy, but one of these links is really good. And I will share my slides, and they have in the notes all of the stuff that I said and links to all of these resources so that they're as available as possible. They are in English, sorry, but hopefully that's still somewhat accessible. This particular link, this is a really good one to find those research studies and look at the research firsthand. And then, oh, there it is on the bottom. This, if you just Google University of Washington, Green Cities, Good Health, that is a page maintained by Professor Kathy Wolf, who has been doing synthetic research, so pulling together lots and lots of studies on the health benefits of urban nature for my whole career. So I think the best collection of public health benefits is you're going to find it through Kathy Wolf. Yeah.